My elder sister was born into a noble family, yet her appearance was unremarkable. Though I was a concubine's daughter, I happened to possess a face that could bring a nation to its knees. On the day the crown prince selected his consorts, my elder sister begged me to hide behind a screen and reveal half of my profile, helping her secure a spot among the chosen ones. Little did I know that the moment she was officially designated as the crown princess, she turned around and betrothed me to Gu Yuan, the capital's most notorious playboy. From our wedding night onward, my elder sister began frequently sending me lavish gifts in the crown prince's name. Today it was rouge specially made for the Eastern Palace. Tomorrow, a rare book the crown prince cherished most. Each item stoked the flames of Gu Yuan's jealousy. Until that day, when she actually sent over a pair of the crown prince's own underwear. Gu Yuan stared at the dragon embroidery on the waistband, his eyes bloodshot. "You whore! How dare you send such filthy evidence of adultery to me?" He grabbed me by the throat and pinned me down hard against the dressing table. He twisted the undergarment viciously around my neck, tightening it with every turn. "Since you're so obsessed with him, why not wear the crown prince's clothes and meet him in the underworld?" The silk cut deep into my flesh. I could clearly hear the sound of my throat cracking. It wasn't until after my death that I realized all of this had been a trap meticulously orchestrated by my elder sister. Now that I've been reborn, I gently caressed the face in the mirror, face 10 times more exquisite than my elder sister's. Since she called me a seductress, I shall embrace that title. Main text: the Xie family receive the Imperial edict. A shrill voice announcing the edict echoed from outside the mansion gates. I quickly suppressed the hatred churning in my eyes and pushed open the door. Around the corner, Xia Langhua came walking toward me. She was dressed in fine robes, yet her face was veiled in a light gauze. In my previous life, I truly believed she had caught a cold, but now I know that from that very moment, she had already been plotting against me. At this thought, a cold smile involuntarily curled my lips, seeing the expression on my face. Xia Langhua paused for a moment, then stepped forward warmly. "What a coincidence, little sister. Shall we go together to the front courtyard to receive the Imperial edict?" I shifted my body, calmly avoiding her touch. Her hand froze awkwardly in midair. A flash of malice flickered in her eyes, but she quickly forced a gentle, fake smile. "Come, little sister. The eunuch delivering the imperial decree is waiting up ahead. We mustn't keep him waiting." I in the front courtyard. The incense altar had already been set up, and everyone was kneeling in orderly rows. Eunuch Li, the one tasked with delivering the decree, cleared his throat and announced in a shrill voice, "By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees, Xia Langhua, the legitimate daughter of the Xie family, is gentle and virtuous, of outstanding character and beauty, is hereby officially appointed as the crown prince's principal consort. So ordered." My father's face instantly flushed with excitement. Though Xia Langhua wore a veil, the smugness and ecstasy in her eyes were nearly overflowing. She rose gracefully, preparing to step forward to receive the edict and express her gratitude. "Hold on." I burst out of the crowd and shoved her aside forcefully. "Your Excellency, please hear me. There is a deception regarding the choice of crown princess. Xia Langhua has deceived the emperor and swapped the portrait I submitted to the palace, allowing her to impersonate me." My words sent shockwaves through the crowd. The entire front courtyard fell instantly silent. Xia Langhua's eyes, visible beneath her veil, widened in shock. She certainly never imagined I would know this secret, but she had only herself to blame for this. After I died in my previous life, Gu Yuan abandoned my body in a mass grave. Xia Langhua actually brought several starving dogs to devour my remains. As my spirit drifted in the air, I heard her contemptuous snicker. "You brainless fool with nothing but a pretty face. I'll tell you the truth. During the initial selection, I switched my portrait with yours. I never expected the crown prince to fall head over heels for your portrait at first sight, while he discarded mine like a worn-out shoe." A flash of intense jealousy crossed her face. only to be replaced by twisted smugness. What a pity! My dear sister, what good is your beauty? The moment the candles went out on our wedding night, the crown prince couldn't even make out the face of the person beside him, and my womb was so obedient I conceived that very night. So the crown prince couldn't lay a finger on me, and you can only lie here and let the wild dogs tear you apart. Ha 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 ha. At this thought, I dug my nails deep into the palms of my hands, forcing back my hatred, and called out, "If you do not believe me, eunuch Li, you may have my elder sister remove her veil right here and compare her to the portrait on file in the palace." Eunuch Li's expression immediately grew grave. He scrutinized me for a moment, then mused. It would seem. Second Miss Chui's features do indeed resemble those in the portrait. Hearing this, my father's expression changed drastically. He hurried forward, bowing and smiling apologetically. "Eunuch Li, please forgive me. My daughter, Qingjiu, has been deeply shaken by her failure to pass the selection and is speaking nonsense. Do not take it seriously. Do not take it seriously." My two daughters do bear a certain resemblance in their features. It is not uncommon for those unfamiliar with them to occasionally mistake one for the other. As he spoke, he glared fiercely at me, his eyes brimming with warning, but I stood my ground. "Whether your daughter is speaking nonsense or not, let her sister remove her veil so we may verify it." Xia Longhua's body trembled slightly, and she instinctively took a half step back. Eunuch Li furrowed his brow. "What is this, Miss Xia?" Father hurried to explain. "My daughter Langhua has recently caught a cold, and her complexion is somewhat unsettled. The Imperial physician advised her not to be exposed to the wind. Hence the veil, not to be exposed to the wind." I pressed on relentlessly. "Then does that mean on her wedding night, my elder sister will also have to wear a veil when she meets the crown prince?" You're talking nonsense." Xia Langhua was so enraged her voice broke into a sob. My father, deeply distressed, quickly stepped in to smooth things over. "Eunuch, rest assured, by the day of the wedding, my daughter will certainly have recovered." Eunuch Li fell silent, pondering. He had seen plenty of the palace's dark secrets, and this matter was indeed full of suspicious points. But since my father was, after all, a high-ranking minister in the court, he could not help but give him some face. "Minister Xia, regarding this matter." Before Eunuch Li could finish, my father turned abruptly and barked, "What are you standing there for? Take the second young lady away at once. She is not to set foot outside the courtyard without my orders." Several burly maidservants immediately stepped forward, grabbed me without a word, and dragged me toward the back courtyard. "Let me go, father. You're being biased. Xia Langhua is deceiving the emperor. He will bring ruin upon our entire family." I struggled fiercely, trying to arouse more suspicion in Eunuch Li. However, my father had been maneuvering in the Imperial court for years. How could he possibly let me disrupt his plans so easily? With just a few words, he managed to temporarily placate Eunuch Li. In the final moment before I was dragged away from the front courtyard, I turned my head and caught Xia Longhua's gaze. There was no trace of panic left in those eyes, only undisguised smugness and scorn. I was roughly thrown back into my own small courtyard. Life under house arrest was no picnic. The food they brought was spoiled, the charcoal was low grade, and even the drinking water had a strange odor. For the first few days, I pounded on the door in anger and shouted at the top of my lungs. But all I got in return was harsher treatment. "If you don't show any remorse, you'll stay locked up until you come to your senses." Reality hit me like a bucket of cold water, bringing me back to my senses instantly. There were only 3 months left until Xia Longhua's wedding. If I stayed locked up here, wouldn't I be completely powerless to do anything? Was I really going to stand by and watch her ascend to the position of crown princess, repeating the tragedy of my past life? No. I absolutely could not sit idly by and wait for my doom. If hidden confrontation didn't work, then I'd have to try a different approach. Didn't Xia Langhua love seeing me submissive and humble? Then I'd put on a show for them. I began to play along. No longer making a fuss. I silently ate the stale food they brought me and bowed my head in submission to the old woman's harassment. Until my father passed by. I knelt on the ground, tears streaming down my face as I confessed my wrongdoing. Father, your daughter has made a mistake. It was your daughter's jealousy of my elder sister that clouded my judgment and made me speak nonsense. I beg you, Father, to forgive your daughter this once. I acted with heartfelt sincerity, seeing my humble and submissive demeanor. My father's expression softened slightly. After admonishing me a few times to behave myself, he left. My house arrest was finally lifted. Just then, the palace hosted a flower viewing banquet, inviting the noble young ladies of the capital to attend. Xia Langhua, as the future crown princess, was naturally on the guest list, and I was brought along by her. I suspected she wanted me to witness her glory firsthand, so I would give up all hope. But as it happened, this was exactly the opportunity one had been waiting for. At the banquet, cups clinked and toasts were raised. Xia Langhua, dressed in elaborate court robes and wearing an exquisite veil, basked in everyone's flattery, already carrying herself with the air of the mistress of the Eastern Palace. The occasional glances she cast my way were laced with a condescending sense of superiority. I remained impassive, pretending to accidentally spill my drink. I slipped into a side chamber to quietly change into a form-fitting qipao that accentuated my curves. Before the mirror, I carefully defined my eyebrows and eyes, applied a floral hairpin to my forehead, and painted my lips with the brightest rouge. Since she had called me a fox-like temptress, I would take that fox-like charm to the extreme, calculating the exact time when Crown Prince Shaosun would pass through the Imperial garden. I pretended to trip over a pebble, let out a coy cry, and stumbled forward, letting the folding fan in my hand just happen to fall at his feet. Be careful, young lady. Shaosun instinctively reached out to offer a feigned helping hand. I lifted my head, my eyes glistening with just the right amount of moisture, and looked straight into his. The moment Shaosun saw my face, he visibly froze, even forgetting to release his hand from my arm. In person, I was, of course, 10 times more beautiful than that portrait. Thank you, Your Highness, I said in a soft, slightly trembling voice, slowly withdrawing my hand. As I bent down to pick up the fan, I deliberately exposed a slender, snow-white nape of my neck. Just then, Xia Langhua appeared in the distance. She had clearly come looking for Shaosun and happened to catch the entire scene of him being mesmerized by me. Even through my veil, I could sense the sudden stiffness in her expression and the fury burning in her eyes. She forced a smile and said to Shaosun in a strained voice, Your Highness, the Empress Dowager is looking for you. Only then did Shaosun snap out of it. He cleared his throat to cover his embarrassment, cast one last lingering glance at me, and followed her away. That evening, back at the Chui residence, Xia Langhua caused a huge scene. She wept bitterly before her father, accusing me of being shameless and seducing the crown prince. Father, with my sister acting so recklessly, how can I possibly continue as crown princess if word gets out? She must be severely punished. Why not? Why not marry her off early, to spare us further trouble? My father's expression grew increasingly grim. He was clearly swayed by her words. Xia Langhua seized the opportunity to add, I think that newly appointed Jinshi, Gu Yuan, would be a good match, though he comes from a humble background. He possesses noble character. Why not betroth my younger sister to him? It would put an end to her wild fantasies. Gu Yuan. It's him again. Of course. In my past life, it was her who egged him on like this, pushing me into the fire. Now, listening to her feigned concern for my well-being, hatred surged within me, though my expression grew even more submissive. I leave it entirely to father's discretion. A hint of smugness flashed in Xia Langhua's eyes. I kept my head bowed and my eyes downcast. But inside I was laughing coldly. Want to throw me into the fire? Then I'll return this blessing right back to her. 3 days later, father summoned me to the flower hall for a discussion. As soon as I entered, I saw Gu Yuan sitting there, dressed in a slightly worn scholar's robe. Looking quite the gentleman. If I hadn't already died once, I would have almost been fooled by his hypocritical facade again. The matchmaking went smoothly. Once Gu Yuan had taken his leave, Xia Langhua came over with feigned concern. Little sister, you see. Young Master Xia is a fine-looking young man. He's bound to go far in the future. Are you satisfied with this match? I sneered inwardly, but put on a bashful expression. If my elder sister has chosen him, he must be a good match. As soon as the words left my mouth, I stepped forward to pour her a cup of tea. I am deeply grateful for all the trouble you've gone through on my behalf. Sister. As I moved, my sleeve brushed against the rim of the cup, and the powder hidden beneath my fingernails fell silently into it. Xia Langhua clearly relished my obedient demeanor. She took the cup, sipped it, and a look of unhidden satisfaction spread across her face. That you think this way makes all my affection for you worthwhile. I lowered my eyes, carefully concealing the chill in my gaze. After about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the medicine took effect. Xia Langhua pressed her hand to her forehead, complaining of dizziness, and said she wanted to return to her room to lie down. I hurried forward to support her, speaking in a gentle tone. Sister, why not rest in my room for a while? It's closer. Her mind was already a bit fuzzy. She didn't say a word and let me lead her away. After settling her in, I quickly put on a veil, disguised myself as her, and returned to the main hall. It wasn't until late at night, around the third watch, that I quietly slipped out of her room. I looked up to see a full moon hanging brightly in the sky. I stared at it blankly, my mind drifting. On the night in my previous life when Gu Yuan tortured me to death, the moon had been just as full, but as I lay in a pool of blood, I didn't even have the strength to look at it one more time. Just as I was lost in thought, a shriek suddenly rang out from the direction of my courtyard. Perfect. I immediately let out a loud cry. Help! There's a thief! Instantly, the entire Xia mansion was lit up. Father rushed over and, seeing me standing under the veranda, looked utterly astonished. What are you doing here? I clutched my chest, feigning shock. I was admiring the moon when I suddenly heard someone shouting in my courtyard. Father's expression darkened instantly, and he led his men straight into my courtyard. As the door swung open, the room was bathed in light. Xia Langhua and Gu Yuan sat on the edge of the bed, their clothes in disarray. Ah! Xia Langhua recognized the group at the doorway, and her shriek was nearly loud enough to tear the roof off. The next second, she lunged at me like a madwoman and slapped me hard across the face. Xia Qingjiu, it's you. You're the one who ruined me. You slut. I clutched my face and stumbled backward, tears welling in my eyes. Sister, what? What are you talking about? I'd like to ask you. Sister, how did you end up in my room, and with my fiancé? Mid-sentence, I was too ashamed to continue. I lowered my head, my shoulders trembling slightly. Xia Langhua's eyes were bloodshot with rage, and she lunged forward again, ready to tear at me. You're full of it. It was clearly you. Enough. Father's face was a terrifying shade of gray. He raised his hand and struck her with a slap, sending Xia Langhua stumbling backward. You shameless wretch. Look at what you've done. Gu Yuan was already so terrified his legs had gone weak. He scrambled off the bed and threw himself to the floor, kowtowing. Your Excellency, please understand. Someone sent me a letter telling me to come. It was dark in the room. I really couldn't see who it was. You scoundrel. My father was trembling with rage, nearly choking on his own breath. Seizing the moment, I spoke up. Father, this is no time for anger. The most important thing is my sister's reputation. If the crown prince learns she is no longer a virgin, that would be the grave crime of deceiving the sovereign. At the words deceiving the sovereign, Xia Langhua snapped her head up, her eyes bulging as if they might burst. Xia Qingjiu, what are you trying to do? You want to steal my position as crown princess, don't you? Ignoring her, I knelt directly on the ground. Father, there is only one way now to ensure the Xia family's safety. Meeting my father's scrutinizing gaze, I said, enunciating each word clearly, I am willing to take my sister's place and marry into the Eastern Palace. As soon as I finished speaking, Xia Langhua lunged at me like a madwoman, her nails digging into my face. You're taking my place. On what grounds? You're just a concubine's daughter. What right do you have to be the crown princess? I refuse. Hearing this, my father, who had been wavering, set his face in a stern expression. You refuse? Then go to the palace right now and tell the crown prince you lost your virginity before marriage. And have him find another crown princess. Xia Langhua was stunned into silence by his shout. That settles it. My father made his final decision and stormed off. Gu Yuan knelt on the ground, looking up at me with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I sneered inwardly. That scum tortured me to death in my past life, and now he wants to marry me in this one. He must be dreaming. That night, Xia Langhua was so furious she smashed every breakable object in the room. But she dared not make a scene. She knew that if she did, she wouldn't even have her life to lose. On the day of the wedding, the procession stretched for 10 miles. Dressed in a crimson wedding gown and veiled in red, I was escorted into the wedding palanquin. The procession was accompanied by music and fanfare, the atmosphere bustling with excitement. But I knew deep down that this celebration wasn't for me. It was for the title of the Xia family's legitimate daughter. Upon arriving at the Eastern Palace, we performed the wedding rites. The master of ceremonies shouted, "First bow to heaven and earth." Just as I was about to bend, a shriek suddenly rang out from the doorway. Stop! Everyone turned to look. Xia Langhua burst in with her hair in disarray, pointing at me and shouting, I am Xia Langhua. She is not. She is the concubine's daughter. Cui Qingjiu. She is impersonating me. The entire hall erupted in an uproar. Crown Prince Shaosun stood beside me, glancing at me with a blank expression that betrayed no emotion. Xia Langhua lunged forward to snatch the folding fan from my hand. Everyone, look. She isn't. I raised my hand to block her, then lowered the fan myself. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. In this life, my face was 3 times more radiant than it had been in my previous one. Set against the crimson wedding gown, I looked as though I had stepped straight out of a painting. I looked at Xia Langhua and smiled. Since you say I'm not Xia Langhua, sister, then please tell us what is depicted in the portrait of the crown princess. Xia Langhua froze. I turned to the master of ceremonies. Please, Your Excellency, bring forth the portrait from the selection of consorts. The portrait was quickly brought in and unfurled before everyone. The person in the painting had willow-like eyebrows and almond-shaped eyes. With a high, straight nose, it was the spitting image of my face. I looked at Xia Langhua. Have you seen clearly? Sister, is the person in this portrait me, or you? Xia Langhua's face went pale. No. That's not right. Someone swapped the portrait. It was supposed to be my face. I smiled. What are you saying? Sister, the betrothal and name-asking ceremonies were all conducted according to protocol. If you were Xia Langhua, how could this portrait be of me? Could it be that you deliberately substituted my portrait back then? Xia Langhua opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She couldn't very well admit that she had made me hide behind the screen to show my face so the crown prince would take a liking to her. Could she? The guests began to whisper among themselves. Xia Langhua's face turned pale and ashen, and her whole body trembled. Shaosun finally spoke, his voice cold and detached. Guards, take this madwoman away. Guards stepped forward, seized Xia Langhua, and dragged her out. Xia Langhua struggled desperately. Your Highness, I am the real Xia Langhua. She's an imposter. Her voice grew fainter and fainter, until it vanished into the night. The master of ceremonies cleared his throat. Your Highness, Crown Princess, the auspicious hour has not yet passed. Shall we continue? Xiao Sun glanced at me. I lowered my head and covered my face again with my folding fan. After the wedding ceremony, I was escorted to the bridal chamber. Inside the bridal chamber, the red candles burned brightly. I sat on the edge of the bed, my palms drenched in sweat. Xiao Sun stood in the doorway, staring at me for a long moment. His gaze made my skin crawl, but I kept my composure and looked up at him. Why are you staring at me like that, Your Highness? Xiao Sun walked over and sat down beside me. A faint scent of alcohol lingered on him, but his eyes were bright. There was no sign of intoxication. About what happened earlier, didn't you intend to explain it to me? I lowered my eyes. Your Highness must have guessed, right? It was my elder sister who switched our portraits. Xiao Sun said nothing. I looked up and met his gaze. If Your Highness is angry, please speak your mind. I accept the consequences. Xiao Sun suddenly smiled. With that smile, his entire demeanor softened. He no longer seemed as cold as before. Why would I be angry? He said. What angers me is that you've only just told me. I was taken aback for a moment. Xiao Sun reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead behind my ear. His touch was gentle, as if he were afraid of hurting me. It is you that I love. Not the name Xia Langhua. My face flushed instantly. The red candles crackled, their flickering light reflecting in his eyes, as if stars were twinkling there. Your Highness. He lowered his head and kissed me. I closed my eyes and wrapped my arms around his neck. That night, the red candles burned until dawn. In the honeymoon's bliss, we spent 3 days clinging to each other, oblivious to the passing of time. 3 days later, Xiao Sun accompanied me back to my parents' home. As soon as we entered the estate, Xia Langhua greeted us warmly. Your Highness, you've finally arrived. Please take your seats. We've been waiting just for you. She was exceptionally attentive today, serving tea and water with a gentle demeanor. I wondered to myself, what was she up to? During the banquet, Xia Langhua's attitude was so good it didn't seem like her at all. She served me food, toasted Xiao Sun, and chatted and laughed with my father. She was like a completely different person. I ate my meal, but my unease only grew. Something was off. Something was very off. After a few rounds of wine, I began to feel a bit tired. Xiao Sun glanced at me. Tired? I'll take you back to rest for a while. I nodded. As we turned the corner of the corridor, a servant suddenly blocked our path. Your Highness, the master says he has something he'd like to discuss with you in the study. Xiao Sun looked at me. I nodded. Go ahead. I'll make my way back to my quarters on my own. After he left, I walked alone toward my courtyard. Halfway there, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of my father and Gu Yuan walking together toward the side gate. My footsteps faltered, and my heart skipped a beat. Since father had summoned Xiao Sun, how could he possibly be leaving with Gu Yuan at this hour? Something's wrong. I've been tricked. My expression darkened, and I turned to run towards Xia Langhua's courtyard. The courtyard was deathly quiet. Clearly, all the servants had been sent away. Terrified, I quickened my pace and kicked the door open. Inside, Xia Langhua lay sprawled on the bed, her clothes disheveled. Xiao Sun was slumped by the bedside, eyes closed, motionless. Instinctively, I reached to close the door, intending to handle this privately, but Xia Langhua beat me to it with a shriek. Ah! Ignoring her, I freed one hand to pinch Xiao Sun's philtrum. It took several pinches before Xiao Sun finally furrowed his brow and slowly opened his eyes. Qing Jiu. I let out a sigh of relief. Before I could say a word, the door swung open. My father and Gu Yuan stood in the doorway, followed by several maidservants. They glanced into the room and all froze in shock. This scene was beyond redemption. Xia Langhua reacted quickly, shoving me aside and kneeling on the ground. Father, I already belong to His Highness. Xiao Sun furrowed his brows, a flash of disgust crossing his eyes. My father's face turned green with rage. Gu Yuan's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. He glared at Xia Langhua, enunciating each word clearly. Xia Langhua, what do you mean by this? Xia Langhua didn't even glance at him, fixing her tear-filled gaze on Xiao Sun instead. Your Highness, what happened just now? You cannot pretend it never happened. I have given you my virtue. You must take responsibility for me. Xiao Sun looked at her coldly. What have I done to you? I've just woken up. I know nothing. Xia Langhua bit her lip. How can your Highness say that? Just now. Clearly. My father finally snapped out of it and stepped forward to pull Xia Langhua away. Enough. Don't you think you've disgraced yourself enough already? Xia Langhua shook off his hand, fixed her gaze on Xiao Sun, and said defiantly, Your Highness, I am now yours. You must take me as your secondary consort. Gu Yuan's face turned from dark to green, then from green to purple. He suddenly took a step forward and roared at Xia Langhua. Xia Langhua, you're about to marry me, and now you claim to belong to the crown prince. What do you take me for? Xia Langhua finally glanced at him, her eyes filled with contempt. What are you? Do you even deserve to marry me? Gu Yuan was trembling all over. He turned to my father, his voice shaking. Father-in-law, this marriage is beyond my station. I call off the engagement. With that, he swept his sleeve and stormed off. My father's face turned ashen. He stood frozen in place, unable to utter a word. Xia Langhua, however, had stopped crying. A flash of smugness crossed her eyes. I looked at her and sneered inwardly, setting a trap for herself, trading her virtue for the position of a secondary consort. She really is willing to go to any lengths. Xiao Sun watched the scene, his brows deeply furrowed. I squeezed his hand and whispered, Are you okay? He shook his head and whispered back, I fainted the moment we parted. Nothing happened. I understood. Turning to my father, I said calmly, Father, since my sister wishes to enter the Eastern Palace, let her do so. Xia Langhua jerked her head up to look at me, her eyes filled with disbelief. She hadn't expected me to agree so readily. I looked at her and smiled. I was eager to see what she would do next. On the carriage ride back, I remained silent. Xiao Sun sat beside me, glancing at me from time to time. Are you angry? He asked. I didn't speak. He shifted closer to me. Qingjiu. I still didn't speak. He sighed, reached out, and pulled me into his arms. There was nothing between me and that Xia Langhua. Deep down, I knew he was telling the truth. Having lived a previous life, I knew better than anyone what kind of person Xiao Sun was. But I just wanted to see him look anxious. But I'm still angry, I said, deliberately keeping a stern face. Xiao Sun smiled, leaning down to kiss my forehead. I was wrong. I've caused you distress. My lady, how about I make it up to you? My face flushed, and I pushed him away. Who needs your apology? He pulled me back toward him. Then I'll grant you a special privilege. From now on, you can leave the palace whenever you want, go shopping whenever you want, and buy whatever you want without having to report to me. How does that sound? My eyes lit up. Really? A ruler's word is his bond. My mood instantly lifted. The next day, I set out with my maid, Rui. The streets were bustling with people, lively and vibrant. I looked around here and there, feeling absolutely wonderful, and temporarily put the matter of Xia Langhua out of my mind. When we came to a stall selling candied hawthorn on a stick, I couldn't move a step further. The bright red hawthorns were strung together, coated in a shiny sugar glaze. They looked so tempting. Rui, go buy 2 skewers. I felt my pockets. I'll wait here for you. Rui nodded and ran off. I stood by the street waiting, lost in thought as I watched the street performers nearby. when suddenly a large hand reached around from behind and covered my mouth and nose. A pungent odor assaulted my nostrils. My limbs went weak instantly. I tried to scream but couldn't make a sound as I was dragged into a nearby alley. Gu Yuan crouched down in front of me, his expression menacing. My whole body went limp, and I slumped against the wall, unable to move. "Qingjiu," he said, his voice low and hushed. "Your CF family has gone too far." I stared at him, saying nothing. He reached out to touch my face, but I turned my head away to avoid him. His hand froze midair, slowly clenching into a fist. "Xia Qingjiu, you were supposed to be mine." He stared at me, his gaze dark and terrifying. "That slut Xia Langhuash doesn't deserve you. Will you come back to me? Let her go with the crown prince. You'll be my wife." I scoffed coldly. "Gu Yuan, have you lost your mind?" His expression darkened, and he suddenly grabbed my chin. "Have I lost my mind? I was driven mad by your Xia family. You were supposed to be my fiancé. And what happened? You married the crown prince, and I was forced to marry that slut Xia Langwanli to be cuckolded by her. Now she's completely disgraced me. How am I supposed to live with this?" I couldn't break free from his grip and could only glare at him. He stared at my face, his gaze growing increasingly unsettling. "Qingjiu, you're mine. You've always been mine." He suddenly leaned in, trapping me tightly in his arms. "Now let's make this official. I'll see if the crown prince still wants you." My heart sank. He had actually lost his mind to this extent. I struggled desperately, but he was too strong. He pinned me down with just one hand. His hand tore at my clothes. I opened my mouth to scream, but he clamped his hand over it. Despair washed over me, and tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. Just then, a furious shout rang out from the end of the alley. "Dare to lay a hand on my crown princess. You're asking for death." A figure charged forward and kicked Gu Yuan flying. Gu Yuan slammed into the wall, slid down, and collapsed on the ground, convulsing. Xiao Sun stood before me, his face etched with murderous intent. He looked down at me, and his gaze softened instantly. "Qingjiu, it's all right now." He picked me up and held me tightly in his arms. I leaned against his chest and heard his heart beating very, very fast. He was afraid. Afraid he'd arrived too late. Afraid something had happened to me. I wrapped my arms around his waist and buried my face in his chest. "Why did you come?" I asked softly. "Rui ran back saying you were missing." His voice still trembled slightly. I almost turned the whole street upside down. I couldn't help but laugh. He looked down and glared at me. "You're still laughing. You scared the life out of me." I lifted my head and kissed him. He froze. Then he held me even tighter. Gu Yuan was thrown into the dungeon. I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy for him. In my past life, he tortured me to death. In this one, he still wanted to ruin me. Even dying 100 times wouldn't be enough. Half a month later, Xia Langhua also entered the Eastern Palace. Originally, Xiao Sun had been dragging his feet and didn't want to agree. But the matter had caused such a stir that even the emperor had heard about it. The legitimate daughter of the Xia family cannot be left hanging in limbo like this. "Take her in," the emperor's offhand remark sealed the outcome. But even after Xia Langhua entered the Eastern Palace, Xiao Sun paid her no mind. It wasn't until the Mid-Autumn Palace banquet that he was forced to bring her along. I sat in the crown princess's seat, with Xiao Sun beside me, occasionally serving me food. Xia Langhua sat demurely at the lower end of the table, appearing quite docile. Yet I felt a vague unease in my heart. The more docile she seemed, the more suspicious it felt. Sure enough, halfway through the banquet, Li Gonggong, the chief eunuch by the emperor's side, suddenly hurried over. His face grim, he whispered a few words in the emperor's ear. The emperor's expression changed instantly, and he sprang to his feet. "What?" The entire hall was startled. The emperor swept his gaze across the room and said in a deep voice, "Everyone stay seated. No one is to move." With that, He turned and strode toward the rear hall. My heart skipped a beat, and I had a bad feeling. Chaosun squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't be afraid, soon." Eunuch Li returned, this time walking straight up to me. "Princess consort. The Emperor requests your presence." All eyes in the room instantly turned to me. Xia Langhua kept her head bowed, but the corners of her mouth turned up slightly. My heart sank as I followed Eunuch Li to the rear hall. As soon as I entered, I saw the Emperor standing there. His face as dark as the bottom of a pot. On the table beside him lay a brocaded box. Inside, the Imperial jade rouge had shattered into several pieces. My father was there as well, kneeling on the ground, his forehead covered in sweat. Seeing me enter, the Emperor raised his eyes. His gaze as cold as a knife. "Crown Princess, do you know the crime you have committed?" I knelt down. "Your Majesty, I do not know what crime you are referring to." The Emperor pointed at the shattered jade rouge. "This item was found in your trunks. My heart skipped a beat. But I kept my composure." Xia Langhua entered at that moment. Upon seeing the shattered jade scepter, she gasped and covered her mouth. "Sister! How could you?" "That was the jade scepter bestowed by His Majesty when you were made a princess consort." Her outburst cast all suspicion onto me. The Emperor looked at her, then at me, his expression growing even darker. Xia Langhua knelt, her eyes brimming with tears. "Father, please calm your anger, though my elder sister has erred. It was certainly not intentional. I beg you to show mercy and spare her a harsh punishment." She spoke with such heartfelt sincerity that anyone unaware of the situation might have thought she was fiercely protecting her elder sister. I took a deep breath and spoke up. "Father, may I dare to ask, was this jade rouge found in my trunk?" "Which trunk? Who found it? And when was it found?" Eunuch Li replied. "It was found in a trunk in the rear hall of the Changel Palace, where Her Highness resides." "It was." He paused, glancing at Xia Langhua. "It was discovered by Cui Zhu, a maid in consort Xia's service. She said she had gone to deliver something to Her Highness, accidentally knocked the trunk open, and saw it. I nodded. "Then please, Father, summon Cui Zhu. I have a few questions for her." The Emperor waved his hand, and Cui Zhu was quickly brought in. She knelt on the ground, trembling like a leaf. I looked at her and smiled. "Cui Zhu, you said you found the jade rouge in my trunk. Now tell me, was that chest locked or unlocked?" Cui Zhu hesitated for a moment. It was unlocked. The chests in my Changel Palace are always locked." "You say it was unlocked. Where was the lock?" Cui Zhu's expression shifted. This servant does not know." I asked again. "You said you were delivering something to me. What was it? Who told you to bring it?" Sweat beaded on Cui Zhu's forehead. It was her ladyship, the secondary consort, who asked the servant to bring a box of pastries." I turned to look at Xia Langhua. Xia Langhua's expression had grown somewhat stiff, but she forced a smile. "Yes. I did ask Cui Zhu to bring pastries to sister. It's the Mid-Autumn Festival. Isn't it proper for sisters to visit one another?" I nodded. "Of course it is. But let me ask Cui Zhu again. If you were delivering pastries, why did you end up at my trunk? My trunk is kept in the rear hall. Surely the pastries were meant for the main hall in the front. What were you doing in the rear hall?" Cui Zhu opened her mouth but couldn't speak. I looked at Xia Langhua and smiled. "Sister, it seems your maid isn't very familiar with the way around here." Xia Langhua's face went pale. The Emperor's expression also changed, his gaze flickering towards Xia Langhua. Cui Zhu's face turned ashen in an instant, and her whole body began to tremble. Xia Langhua stood up. "What do you mean by that? Cui Zhu is my maid. Are you accusing me?" I looked at her, smiling faintly. "Why are you so flustered?" "Sister, I haven't finished speaking yet." I turned to the Emperor. "Father, this son has another way to uncover the truth. Since the jade rouge is shattered, there should be fingerprints on the shards. Let the experienced elderly matrons in the palace examine them. It will be immediately clear whose hands touched this rouge. And no sooner had the words left my mouth than Cui Shu fell to her knees with a thud, banging her head on the ground repeatedly. Your Majesty, spare my life. Your Majesty, spare my life. It was the consort who ordered me to do this. The consort shattered the scepter herself and told me to place it in the crown princess's trunks. I was merely following orders. Xia Longhua's face turned ashen. What nonsense are you spouting? Cui Shu sobbed. Your Highness, you can't abandon me. You promised to give me 200 taels of silver once the deed was done, so I could leave the palace and marry, but you never said this would cost me my life. The emperor's face was so dark it looked as if ink might drip from it. He glared at Xia Langhua, speaking slowly and deliberately. So this is the sort of woman you are, consort Xia. Framing the crown princess and destroying an imperial gift. What punishment do you deserve? Xia Longhua's legs gave way, and she collapsed to her knees, but her eyes darted about, and suddenly she clutched her stomach, crying out, Father, you cannot kill me. The emperor sneered. Why not? Xia Langhua raised her head and screamed hoarsely. Because I'm carrying the crown prince's child. The moment her words fell, the entire room was thrown into shock. Xiao Sun, who had just been about to enter the hall, stopped dead in his tracks. He instinctively looked at me, as if to explain. I gave him an almost imperceptible shake of the head. The emperor's expression shifted several times. What did you say? Xia Langhua placed a hand on her belly, her eyes brimming with tears. Father, I am already more than a month pregnant. This child is the crown prince. It is your own grandson. You cannot kill me. You cannot leave your own grandson without a mother. As she spoke, she turned to look at me, her eyes filled with triumph. I stared at her, my heart in turmoil. Pregnant with Xiao Sun's child. Impossible. Xiao Sun had said with his own mouth that he hadn't even laid a finger on her. But seeing Xia Longhua's defiant, unconcerned demeanor, I still felt uneasy. I stepped forward and curtsied to the emperor. Father, since consort Xia claims to be with child, perhaps we should summon the imperial physician to take her pulse. If she is truly with child, it would be best to make preparations early. The emperor glanced at me and nodded. The crown princess speaks wisely. Attendants, summon the imperial physician. Xia Langhua knelt on the ground. Her expression flickered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. I stared at her profile, a vague unease gnawing at me. How could she not be the least bit flustered? The imperial physician arrived shortly. Xia Langhua extended her wrist, a smile still on her face. I clenched the handkerchief in my hand. Xiao Sun stood beside me, holding my hand. His palm was drenched in sweat. The hall was so quiet you could hear the crackling of the candles. Imperial physician Zhou took her left wrist, then her right. He took her right, then her left again, his brow furrowing deeper and deeper. After a long moment, he rose and knelt before the emperor. Your Majesty, consort Xia is indeed with child. Already more than a month along. My mind went blank. Is she really pregnant? The emperor's expression was complex. He glanced at Xiao Sun, then at me, and finally fixed his gaze on Xia Langhua, his eyes carrying a hint of scrutiny. Xia Langhua clutched her stomach and looked at Xiao Sun with tear-filled eyes. Your Highness, did you hear that? I am truly carrying your child. You can't just abandon me. I turned to look at Xiao Sun. He wasn't looking at Xia Langhua. He was staring at me, his eyes filled with panic. Qingjiu, I could tell he was genuinely panicked. Not the kind of panic that comes from guilt, but the kind that comes from fearing I wouldn't believe him. The emperor waved his hand. Take consort Xia away first and make sure she's well cared for. This matter, we shall discuss it another day. Xia Langhua was helped to her feet, and as she passed by me, the corner of her mouth curled up. Her gaze clearly said, You lost. That evening, Xiao Sun came to my chambers, I lay with my back to him, saying nothing. He sat down by the bedside and remained there for quite a while before reaching out to touch my shoulder. I shifted further back, and his hand hovered in midair before finally dropping. The room was deathly quiet, broken only by the occasional crackle of the candles. Qingjiu. He sighed, his voice low. I truly did not touch her. I did not turn around, nor did I respond. He added, "Do you not trust me?" I rolled over to face him. In the candlelight, his brow was furrowed, his eyes filled with anxiety. Not a trace of the crown prince's air of authority remained. "I believe you didn't touch her. But what about the child in her womb? The emperor recognizes it as his eldest grandson. If she gives birth, what will become of her?" Xiao Sun was silent for a moment before saying, "There must be a way." I stared at him. "What way? Tell me." He leaned in and lowered his voice. "Just leave it to your husband." I looked at him, and my anger subsided a little. "Then what are you doing here tonight?" He blinked, looking innocent. "I've come to apologize to my lady." I snorted. "The crown prince of all people, what do you have to apologize for?" He leaned in and whispered something in my ear. My face flushed instantly. "Xiao Sun." He smiled and pulled me into his arms. "My lady, please don't be angry. I was wrong. I'll accept whatever punishment you give me." No arguments. The candlelight flickered, and the night was filled with passion. Meanwhile, Xia Langhua was growing increasingly smug. News of her pregnancy had spread throughout the capital. Everyone knew that Xia Langhua, the secondary consort of the Eastern Palace, was carrying the emperor's first grandson. She began to bully me openly. One day she'd say the flowers in my courtyard were blooming beautifully, so she had them all cut and sent to her quarters. The next day she claimed the fabrics I used were too luxurious. She needed them while pregnant and had my storerooms ransacked. I endured it all. I waited for the day she would fall from the clouds into the swamp. On the day of the emperor's Earth Day banquet, Xia Langhua attended with her belly not yet showing, her head held high. I paid her no mind, turning instead to converse with several other consorts. Suddenly, a shriek rang out behind me. I turned to see Xia Langhua clutching her stomach as she collapsed to the ground. Blood trickled down her legs, staining her moon-white gown crimson. The entire hall was in an uproar. The emperor's face turned pale, and he immediately summoned the imperial physician. Xia Langhua glared at me with all her might, pointing her finger at me and screaming, "Crown Princess!" The Crown Princess did this to me. Everyone's gaze fell upon me. I froze. The emperor looked at me coldly. "Crown Princess, do you have anything to say?" I knelt. "Your Majesty, please judge fairly. I was 3 zhang away from her. I never even touched her, but the maid by Xia Langhua's side insisted she had seen me hand Xia Langhua a cup of tea with her own eyes. I did indeed hand her tea. At the banquet, everyone had passed around tea, but there was nothing in my cup." The emperor's face darkened, and he was about to depose me on the spot. Xiao Sun knelt down to plead for mercy. "Father, Qingjiu would never do such a thing. I beg you to investigate thoroughly." The emperor glanced at him. "The evidence is irrefutable. What is there left to investigate?" Xiao Sun raised his head and said, enunciating each word clearly, "The child in Xia Langhua's womb is not mine at all." The entire hall erupted in an uproar. Xia Langhua turned pale as a sheet and struggled to her feet. "Your Highness, you... how can you say such a thing? This child is clearly..." Xiao Sun sneered. "Clearly what?" "Clearly the bastard child of Yu and Gu Yuan." Xia Langhua trembled all over, yet still tried to defend herself. I stood up and walked before the emperor. "Father, I have something to say. Since consort Xia claims I harmed her child, let us examine it to determine how many months along she is." Xia Langhua's face grew even paler. The emperor fixed his gaze on her and said in a deep voice, "Summon the imperial physician. Examine her for me." The imperial physician stepped forward, examined her carefully, then knelt to report, "Your Majesty, this fetus is already over 4 months old, over 4 months. Xia Lenghua had only been in the Eastern Palace for 3 months. The child in her womb was a month older than the time she had been in the palace. Yet Imperial physician Zhou, who had performed the initial examination, had failed to detect it. The foul play involved was plain for anyone to see. The Emperor's face turned ashen. I spoke up at the right moment. Does your Majesty recall that Xia Lenghua and Gu Yuan were once betrothed? They met frequently in private. If this humble son remembers correctly, that period was precisely over 4 months ago. The Emperor looked at Xia Lenghua. Xia Lenghua had already collapsed to the ground, trembling all over. Someone, summon Minister Xia. The Emperor said coldly. My father was summoned to the palace shortly thereafter. When he saw Xia Lenghua's state, his expression shifted. The Emperor asked him, do you know about the affair between Xia Lenghua and Gu Yuan? My father knelt on the ground, cold sweat pouring down his forehead. I glanced at him and said, Father, I know you care deeply for my sister, but this concerns the Imperial bloodline. Must tell the truth. My father looked up at me with a complex expression. Of course he knew Xia Lenghua was already finished. To protect her, the entire Xia clan would be buried with her. To protect me, however, would bring the Xia family wealth and glory. He lowered his head and said in a heavy voice, Your Majesty, this servant knows. Back then, Lenghua and Gu Yuan did indeed have an affair. This servant caught them with my own eyes. Xia Lenghua's eyes widened. Father, you. The Emperor's face darkened. So much for Xia Lenghua. He slammed his fist on the table, tainting the Imperial bloodline, deceiving the sovereign. She deserves to die 1,000 deaths. Xia Lenghua threw herself to the ground, banging her head against the floor. Your Majesty, spare my life. Your Majesty, spare my life. The Emperor didn't even glance at her. Bring the poisoned wine. Xia Lenghua was dragged away, screaming all the way. I watched her retreating figure and felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite put into words. In my past life, she caused my death. In this life, she died before my very eyes. This is all karma. Yet I didn't feel particularly satisfied. It was just a faint sense of detachment. Day after day passed, and Xiao Sun continued to treat me well, but I knew deep down that serving him with my beauty could not last forever. This face of my knight captivates him now. But what about in a few years? I needed a child. A year later, my wish came true, and I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The Emperor was overjoyed and personally bestowed a name upon him. Holding my son in my arms, I finally felt at peace. That evening, I said to Xiao Sun, Your Highness, I haven't fully recovered yet. Why don't we take in a couple of younger sisters for you to attend to you? Xiao Sun was playing with our son when he heard this and looked up at me. What did you say? I repeated myself. Taken some concubines for you. Xiao Sun set our son down and stared at me for a long moment. Xia Qingjiu. He suddenly called me by my full name. What do you mean by that? His intense gaze made me feel uneasy. Just exactly what it sounds like. Your Highness is the Crown Prince. You need people to attend to you. He stood up and walked over to me. Do you think I married you just because of your looks? I said nothing. He gripped my chin, forcing me to look up at him. Xia Qingjiu. Listen carefully. At first, I was captivated by your beauty, but later, I found myself growing more and more unable to live without you. It's not because of your face, it's because of who you are. I was stunned. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. In this lifetime, I want only you. Don't even think about taking concubines or secondary wives. I, Xiao Sun, am yours and yours alone for this lifetime. My eyes stung with tears, and I reached out to embrace him. Outside the window, the moonlight flowed like water. I nestled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and slowly closed my eyes. In this life, I have finally found happiness. The story ends here. Thank you all for reading. See you in the next one.